In our compound, we don't fear the masquerade that emerge during the harvest moon, we fear my Uncle Chima's footwork when the sun is still high. There is no funeral, there is no ceremony, and yet he dances like a man summoning ancestors who never ask to be disturbed. The story opens with me, the nephew, cataloging the escalating horror of Uncle Chima's public performances. The air is thick with red dust and thicker still with our family's humiliation. We see the market women's whispers, the elders' tight-lipped disapproval, and Mama's desperate attempts to keep him indoors during daylight hours, creating a world where invisibility is survival and spectacle is suicide. Each dance cost us something. A marriage proposal withdrawn. A business partnership dissolved. Invitations that stop coming. The camera of village judgment never blinks, and Uncle Chima performs directly into its unforgiving lens, arms spread wide, feet stamping rhythms that belong to the grave, not the marketplace. The argument started before dawn, as most of our family battles did, when the compound was still safe under darkness and no one could see our shame spilling into the courtyard. He is not sick, if funny. He is chosen. Mama Grace's voice carried that dangerous calm she used when her patience had already broken. Papa paced near the water drum, his shadow stretching long in the kerosene light. Chosen. The Aneichukwu family cancelled their daughter's introduction because of him. Do you know what that means? Do you understand what we've lost? I understand that you're willing to destroy your brother to save your pride. Uncle Chima sat on his mat in the corner, humming. Always humming. Even in sleep, they said, his body moved to rhythms the rest of us couldn't hear. Papa's jaw tightened. Pastor Jeremiah has a prayer house in Ojidai. 3 weeks of fasting and deliverance. They've cured worse. Cured. Mama laughed, bitter and sharp. You want to cage what you don't understand. I pressed myself against the doorframe, watching Uncle Chima's fingers tap against his knee. 1, 2, 3, pause, 1, 2, 3. The pattern never changed. He'd been doing it since I was small enough to think it was a game. The elder spoke to me yesterday, Papa said quietly. Chief Aneichukwu himself. They want him gone from the village, Grace. Or they want us gone. The tapping stopped. Uncle Chima looked up, and for just a moment, I saw something in his eyes that wasn't madness. It was knowing. It was exhaustion. It was the look of a man holding a door closed that everyone else wanted to walk through. Then let them have their wish, Papa said. The van comes tomorrow. Chief Aneichukwu woke to a word without sound. His mouth opened. His throat moved. But the words that should have thundered through his compound, the voice that had sentenced men, blessed marriages, and dismissed my uncle as a madman, produced nothing but empty air. His wife found him clawing at his neck, eyes wild with panic that no scream could express. By noon, the news had spread through Umu-Oka like fever. The chief who had spoken against the dancing fool had been struck mute in the night. And on his threshold, where his feet would have first touched the ground that morning, lay a thin coating of grey dust that shouldn't have been there. No wind had blown it. No harmattan haze had settled. It simply appeared, fine as ash, cold as a grave. The elders gathered in whispered emergency. 7 of them, all men who had signed the letter demanding Uncle Chima's removal. They stood in a tight circle in the chief's parlor, their words tumbling over each other in rising fear. But Chief Aneichukwu could only point at his open mouth and shake his head, over and over, while grey dust continued to seep under his door like water finding a crack. I heard about it from Adana, who heard it from her mother, who'd been there when the chief's wife began to scream. By the time I reached our compound, Mama Grace was already standing in the doorway, her face set like stone. Where is he? She asked Papa. Papa wouldn't look at her. The van left an hour ago. Then God help us all, she whispered. Dibia Okofor arrived at sunset, his walking stick striking the ground in rhythms that made my skin prickle. He was older than memory, bent like a question mark, with eyes that had seen too much and forgotten nothing. He didn't greet anyone. He walked straight to Chief Aneichukwu's compound and knelt at the threshold, running his gnarled fingers through the grey dust. The crowd that had gathered fell silent. How long has the dancer been gone? His voice cut through the evening air like a blade. Since morning, someone answered. Ifoni took him to Ojidai. Dibia Okofor closed his fist around the dust. When he opened it again, it fell through his fingers like water, but water that moved against gravity, pulling upward before dispersing into nothing. The guardians have stopped watching, he said, and the way he said it made grown men step backward. For 3 generations, the Okori family has held the boundary. The dance was never madness. It was a ritual. A word. A lock on a door that should never open. Mama Grace pushed through the crowd. Tell them. Tell them what my husband died protecting. The Dibia looked at her with something like pity. Your husband danced until his heart gave out because he understood what his brother now carries alone. Every step, every movement, it keeps them contained. The ones who hunger for voice. For flesh. For the living world they were banished from. He stood, bones cracking, and pointed his stick toward the horizon where Ojidai lay. You have locked away your shield, he said to Papa, who had followed Mama Grace. And the enemy you've never seen is already crossing the threshold. The prayer house in Ojidai smelled like desperation and palm oil. Pastor Jeremiah was a thick man with soft hands and a voice trained to command demons that existed only in his imagination. He took one look at Uncle Chima, still humming, still tapping, still moving in small circles, and smiled with the confidence of someone who'd broken 100 troubled souls. 3 weeks, he told Papa. Maybe less if the spirit is weak. They locked Uncle Chima in a room beneath the church. No windows. One door. A Bible placed on the floor like it could hold back whatever lived inside him. Papa paid in cash and prayers and didn't look back as he drove away. Inside the cellar, Uncle Chima stopped moving for the first time in 20 years. His body went rigid. His humming cut off mid-breath. And in the silence that followed, something else began to move, something that had been waiting for exactly this moment. Back in Umu-Oka, I woke to screaming. Not human screaming. Something else. A sound that vibrated in my teeth and made my eyes water. I ran outside to find half the compound awake, staring at the sky. The stars were wrong. Dimmer. Like something vast had passed between them and us, blocking their light. Mama Grace stood in the center of the courtyard, her face turned upward, lips moving in prayer. But even her words seemed to fall dead in the air, swallowed by a silence that was louder than any noise. It's here, she whispered. He stopped dancing, and it's finally here. Papa's car appeared in the distance, headlights cutting through darkness that felt too thick. He'd only made it halfway to Ojidai before turning back. Too late. The grey dust was already spreading. It came through the walls like smoke that had learned to think. Mrs. Okonkwo saw it fast, a darkness that moved wrong, flowing along the ground of her kitchen like oil, pulling in corners before rising, taking shape without ever becoming solid. She opened her mouth to scream and found no sound would come. The grey dust followed in its wake, settling on everything the shadow touched. By morning, 12 more families had woken to the silence. 12 more voices stolen. And in each compound, that same fine ash coating their thresholds, their doorposts, their windows, marking them. The entity moved through Umu-Oka like a collector cataloging debts, and we were all overdue. I watched from our window as it drifted past, too afraid to breathe. It had no face, but I felt it looking. Searching. Hungry for something we'd denied it through years of what we'd called my uncle's madness. Namdi holds it back, Mama Grace had said once, when she thought I wasn't listening. Not Uncle Chima, Namdi. His true name, the one no one used anymore except in whispers. Your grandfather danced. Your father danced. And now Namdi dances. The ritual passes through blood, and the moment it stops, they come. I hadn't believed her then. Now the shadow stood outside our compound, testing the air like something testing for weakness. And I understood with perfect, terrible clarity what Uncle Chima's dancing had actually been doing all these years. Not summoning spirits. Holding them back. The thing outside our door shifted, grew larger, and began to seep through the cracks in our walls. Inside, Mama Grace lit 3 white candles in a pattern I didn't recognize, her hands shaking so badly the matches kept going out. Where is my brother? Popo's voice cracked with something beyond fear. What have I done? The shadow answered by swallowing our lights. Mama Grace had the gift, though she never called it that. She could see what others couldn't, the thin places where the living world pressed against the other side, where spirits left their fingerprints on reality. It's why she'd never doubted Uncle Chima. She'd seen what he was fighting long before the rest of us stopped laughing at his dancing. Now, as the darkness spread through Umu-Oka and voices disappeared like candles being snuffed, she saw something that made her blood run cold. Bruises. Not on the people in the village, on Nnamdi himself, though he was locked away in Ojidai. She saw them appear on his arms first, dark purple bloom spreading across skin that no hand had touched. Then his chest. His back. His face. Each mark appearing like invisible fists were striking him, over and over, in punishment for his stillness. He's fighting through the walls, she whispered, and I didn't understand until I saw her looking at nothing, her eyes tracking movement I couldn't see. They are punishing him for stopping. For being caged. And he's still trying to hold them back even locked in that room. She grabbed Popo's arm with strength that made him wince. You have to bring him home. Now. Before they break him completely. Grace, the roads. The roads will be the least of our concerns if Nnamdi stops fighting. Do you understand? He's all that stands between us and them, and right now he's in a concrete cell beneath a church, beaten bloody by forces that Pastor doesn't even believe exist. I'd never heard Mama Grace's voice carry that kind of edge. That kind of certainty laced with terror. Perhaps that's what comes from loving people who share the weight of stories we've let ourselves forget. Stories buried under shame and the desperate need to appear normal. To be accepted. To not be the family with the dancing madman. Popo looked at the spreading dust on our floor, at the shadow that had finally retreated but would return, at his wife's face that had aged 10 years in 2 days. He reached for his car keys. The grey dust had followed Popo's car to Ojidai, coating the highway like the earth itself was rotting. Pastor Jeremiah met him at the church entrance, his confident smile long gone. His lips moved but no sound emerged, the silence had claimed him too. Popo didn't wait for explanations. He ran. The cellar door was locked from the outside, just as they'd left it. But the sounds coming from within weren't human. Rhythmic thuds. The scrape of feet on concrete. And beneath it all, that familiar humming, but wrong now, strained, desperate, like a song being sung while drowning. Popo's hands shook so badly he dropped the keys twice before getting the door open. Uncle Chima, Nnamdi, collapsed forward into his arms. Blood ran from his nose. His knuckles were split and raw. Bruises covered every visible inch of skin, some fresh and purple, others already yellowing at the edges. He'd been fighting for 2 days straight, throwing himself at walls that didn't exist, holding back an invasion no one else could see. I'm sorry, Popo sobbed. God forgive me, I'm sorry. But Nnamdi wasn't looking at him. His eyes were fixed on something behind Popo, something coming down the cellar stairs. The shadow had followed them here, drawn by the weakest point in the barrier. Nnamdi stood, swaying, and began to move. Not the wild, embarrassing dancing that had shamed our family. This was different. Precise. Ancient. Each step placed with mathematical precision, his arms cutting patterns in the air that left trails of light only he could see. His body was broken but his feet knew the way. The shadow recoiled. Just barely. Just enough. Drive, Nnamdi whispered through split lips. His first words in 2 days. Drive fast. It's time for Umu-Oka to see what they've been saved from. They made it back as the sun set, painting the sky the color of old blood. The entire village had gathered in the square, drawn by the same instinct that brings animals before an earthquake. Chief Aniuchukwu stood at the center, still mute, surrounded by the other silenced elders. 37 voices stolen in 3 days. 37 families marked by grey dust that wouldn't sweep away. And around them all, at the edges of perception, the shadows waited. Nnamdi stepped from the car. No music. No drum. No ceremony. Just a broken man in blood-stained clothes, swaying on feet that could barely hold his weight. They called me mad, he said, and his voice carried across the square like thunder. For 20 years, you watched me dance and called it shame. Called it curse. Called it anything but what it was. He took the first step. The shadows at the edge of the square surged forward, sudden and hungry, and finally, everyone could see them. Children screamed. Women clutched their husbands. Chief Anichuku fell to his knees, pointing with shaking hands at the entities that had been feeding on Umu-Oka's silence. Nnamdi danced. Not the clumsy, embarrassing movements we'd mocked. This was warfare. Each step pushed the shadows back. Each turn of his wrist carved boundaries they couldn't cross. His body, beaten, exhausted, pushed past every human limit, became the barrier between the living and the hungry dead. The shadows took form as they attacked. Twisted faces. Grasping hands. Mouths that opened too wide. Things that had worn human shapes once, before hunger had rotted them into something else. Nnamdi fought them all. For every shadow that lunged, his feet found the counter-rhythm. For every grasping hand, his arms traced symbols that burned with light that had no source. Blood ran from his nose, his ears, his eyes, but he didn't stop. The village watched their shame save their lives. And they finally understood what the Okori family had been protecting them from all along. The first drop fell on Chief Anichuku's upturned face. Then another. Then the sky opened, and water poured down in sheets, washing the grey dust from thresholds and doorposts and the grooves between cobblestones where it had settled like old guilt. The shadows broke apart like smoke in wind, their forms dissolving, their hunger finally denied. The last one, the largest, the oldest, reached for Nnamdi one final time before the rain tore through it, scattering it into nothing but memory. Nnamdi stopped dancing. He swayed once, twice, then collapsed. Papa caught him before he hit the ground. And in the silence that followed, the clean silence, the empty silence, the silence that held no stolen voices, Chief Anichuku gasped. "Forgive me," he said, his voice raw and new. "Forgive us all." One by one, the voices returned. 37 people finding their words again, speaking over each other in relief and shame and wonder. The sound of it was beautiful and terrible, all those voices that had been taken, now restored by a dance we'd called madness. Mama Grace knelt beside her brother-in-law, her hands checking his pulse, his breathing. "He'll live," she said, and the words carried the weight of prophecy. "But he can't do this alone anymore." The ritual was meant to be passed down, taught, shared. Not carried by one man until it breaks him. She looked at Papa, and I saw him finally understand the true cost of the shame he tried to bury. "The dance doesn't end," she said. "It only passes to the next guardian." Above us, the rain continued to fall, washing away the last traces of the grey dust. But some stains run deeper than water can reach. Papa started learning the steps the next morning. Not because he wanted to. Not because it was glorious or because the village suddenly saw the Okori family as heroes. They didn't. Fear and gratitude make poor foundations for respect, and most people simply avoided looking at us directly now, like we'd become dangerous things that kept them safe. Papa learned because Nnamdi was dying. Not from the shadows or the battle. From exhaustion. From 20 years of holding a door closed that an entire lineage was meant to guard in shifts. His body was giving out, one system at a time, and Dibia Okafor said there was no medicine for a spirit walk to death. "The steps must be precise," Nnamdi whispered from his mat, his voice barely audible. 1, 2, 3, pause. The pause is when you're listening. The pause is when you hold the boundary in place. Papa's feet moved clumsily at first, stumbling over rhythms he couldn't quite hear. But slowly, the pattern took root. His body began to remember what his mind had forgotten, that the Okori men had always been guardians, that the dance ran in his blood too, even if he'd spent a lifetime trying to bleed it out. I watched from the doorway as my father learned to do the thing he tried to destroy his brother for doing. "Will you teach me too?" I asked one evening. Mama Grace looked up from where she was grinding herbs. Nnamdi's eyes opened, clearer than they'd been in days. "The ritual passes through blood," he said. "And blood does not thin with time." "Yes. You learn." So when your father's body tires, yours will be ready. It wasn't the future I'd imagined. Not the escape from Umu-Oka I dreamed of, or the life in the city where no one knew our shame. But standing there, watching Papa's feet find the rhythm, watching Mama Grace's steady hands work medicines that came from knowledge older than the village itself, watching Namdi's face finally find something like peace. I understood that some responsibilities don't ask permission. They simply wait for us to be brave enough to carry them. Outside, the evening sun painted everything gold. And somewhere at the edge of the compound, barely visible, the shadows watched and waited. They would always be waiting. But now, finally, we were watching back.